Okay, I'm gonna just go straight now to Scott Klinger, who did a bit. He wrote a bit on the two types of retirement. Hold on, let me just get his number, and then I'll bring up his. A Tale of Two Retirements.
This is Scott Klinger.
Oh, hi, Scott. Thank you for joining us on Organic News on Awake Radio with me, Catherine Waters.
You're welcome. Hi, Catherine.
Hi. So again, I'm really glad that you can be. I was looking and reading your article, A Tale of Two Retirements, in the Center for Effective Government website. And right where that scale is a quote from you that reads, "The CEO's extraordinary nest eggs are not the result of extraordinary performance. They are the result of rules intentionally tipped to reward those already on the highest rungs of the ladder." I mean, the bottom line is, and I've been saying this for a while, in everything in this country, is the agenda is already in place. When it comes to policing, when it comes to, justice, when it comes to everything, the agenda is already set. And the people don't know that, but they're finding it out the hard way.
Yeah, that's right. And in terms of our report, we really wanted to change the story from it being one about a problem of personal responsibility about people not saving enough to rules being rigged to benefit those who already have more than enough at the expense of those who don't have enough. And I think we've been quite successful in helping that story to change.
So being that you said that, let's start there, because even me, in my personal life, I was always blamed if I couldn't get ahead in life. No matter how many blatant hardships that were clearly in your life or whatever, it was always your fault if you couldn't just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Oh, this is the land of America. Everybody has an opportunity, and yada yada yada. So
yeah, I think that's right.
And people more and more now are clearly seeing how that is not the case, that underneath there's this shadow, this current, this undertow, because it's not like the financial institutions are just going to come right out and say, oh yeah, by the way, we're just bleeding you guys to death.
Right, and the incentives are all for corporations to cut workers' retirement pay in order to boost their earnings and boost their CEOs' pay and retirement assets.
I have one question. How much more sociopathological can corporations get? Is there a limit?
Well, I think they are not thinking about their own long-term interests very well. In terms of, if we have a bunch of seniors that don't have any money to spend when they're retired, money to go out to dinner, money to buy little toys or clothing for their grandchildren, other things that older people spend money on, that doesn't bode very well for corporations' profits in the future, their ability to continue to prosper. So I think, there is a kind of a self-corrective of all this greed in the near term ends up hurting everyone in the long term.
And so just referring to your article, it says, just look at the statistic. The 100 largest CEO retirement funds are worth a combined $4.9 billion. That's equal to the entire retirement account savings of 41% of American families.
Right, and 50 million families is in that number, so that's an awful lot of people. 100 people have as much assets as 50 million families.
And I don't know, how does all this criminality just are allowed. I mean, when the people are going, the people are good, and I mean they're going along with a system, and it's the cheaters that are making out like bandits.
Well, the problem is it's not criminal; it is legal, and the way that we have to stop it is by organizing and getting together and demanding that the rules be changed so that it's no longer legal and that we have laws and rules that benefit everybody.
The rising inequality is the result of rules, right, intentionally tipped to reward those already on the highest rung of the ladder. While the availability of pension plans for most Americans has dwindled in the last 30 years, more than half of Fortune 500 CEOs receive company-sponsored pension plans. Their firms are allowed to deduct the cost of these plans from their taxes, even if they have cut worker pensions or never offered them at all.
That's right. So we had a period after World War II in the 1950s and 60s and 70s where Americans actually grew together in terms of inequality. The divide narrowed. People at the bottom did better than people at the top, and so the gap got smaller. And more workers had good pension plans. Companies provided pensions. Workers didn't need to save or go out of their way to prepare for their retirement because it was a part of being an employee. And that began to change in 1980 when President Reagan came into office, and one of the first things he did was bust the Air Traffic Controllers Union, PATCO, in 1981. And pretty much that was the peak of American trade unionism, and that was also the peak of good pension plans at work, and both have been falling ever since.
And so he broke up a union, and yet they don't break up banks.
Right. Yeah, we have, on the other hand, you're right, we've had concentrated power in all corporations, not just banks, but pretty much any business you look at. The number of providers have gotten fewer and much bigger and more powerful, both economically and politically.
And if I could ask you also, when Eric Holder said that the banks were too big to fail, what was your response?
Well, I think it's not good to have any business that's too big to fail, and that we shouldn't be bailing out businesses that don't do what they're supposed to be doing. The other thing that's even more alarming to my point of view is that we've allowed these and even incentivized these enormous payments to CEOs, regardless of whether they even do a good job or not. It's kind of a heads I win, tails you lose kind of game. And so we really need to put some rules in place to discourage these vast accumulations of wealth. One of the things that happened in the 1950s and 60s was we had much higher tax rates on upper income people. At one point in the 1950s, every person that earned over several $100,000 paid a 90% tax on any extra dollar they earned. So it's not really worth it to go out of your way to get hundreds of millions of dollars if you're only going to keep a dime of each dollar. And that kept wages quite low, much lower than they are today. Athletes didn't make nearly as much, entertainers or corporate executives. So that's one thing to look at. I'm not advocating we go back to 90%, but we're at 40% right now, and I think we could certainly go quite a bit higher than that and use the extra tax money to rebuild our schools and create affordable college for people and help our seniors pay their drug costs and nursing home costs and things like that.
I mean, because there is, a healthy balance that sooner or later, even the 1% are going to have to face the facts that they're screwing themselves by screwing the people. Because
I think we've really come apart as a society. We don't see ourselves as a part of one another, and even working class and poor people have bought into this everybody for themselves mentality, or I can get rich someday. I've encountered a lot of fairly low-income people who get mad when we talk about closing the gap because they think they're going to be a millionaire someday. They're going to win the lottery or invent the next video game or do something that to make a bundle of money, and they don't want anybody taxing it, even though, that those policies right now are hurting them when we don't tax very well-off people.
Oh, is that what a lot of low-income people are saying? I mean,
I've heard it. I wouldn't say the overwhelming majority, but I've heard it from many people. Will object. One of the things we encourage is an estate tax, which would return great fortunes of great wealth to the common good, common pot when very wealthy people die. And I've had a lot of very low-income people get very mad at me that we would do that because they're convinced that the American dream is real and they're going to make money one day. So they're really, arguing the interests of the super wealthy, even though that kind of lifestyle is probably not going to happen for them.
Well, that's just it. I mean, the American dream has kind of shifted to the point where, you really have to be, I mean, I was going to use the word cheater, but, almost just like a complete hedonist. Like, you're not going to achieve the American dream honestly.
Well, I think we have a bad story about how wealth is created in this country, and a lot of people who have made great fortunes think they did it alone. We talk about people who are self-made millionaires, and that's hardly ever true. Any great fortune has many people working behind it.
Right.
People who work on the internet, developed internet products. There was a lot of faceless, nameless scientists who worked to construct the internet, make sure it worked, build the platforms. They'd have nothing without those people's wisdom and work and ingenuity. So we need a bit more gratitude for the shoulders that we're all standing on. None of us have made it alone. We've all had help along the way, whether it's
right.
A teacher, a parent, or someone in our community have helped us learn and do better. And we need to be grateful for that and thank them and give back.
Yeah, like that's just it too. I think a lot of it has to do with the starting point of many people. I mean, I don't know if this is accurate, and maybe you do. If the starting point of many people is lower than it used to be, as far as right, maybe socioeconomic or because I mean some of the conditions that some people are born into with I don't know, like no family, broken family, bad neighborhoods, drug neighborhoods, crime neighborhoods. I mean, it's almost impossible for anybody to lift yourself up out of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there, one thing I would add is, neighborhoods with a lot of pollution that hurts kids' ability to learn. Asthma rates are rising, particularly in inner city neighborhoods, that make it hard for kids sometimes to go to school. Not having enough to eat makes it hard to learn. And then even when kids do have a little bit better lives and more security, they go to college and can't afford it and end up graduating from college with basically a home mortgage to pay off, every month without even having a home, just to pay their student loan debt. So there's lots of things that have changed, and I think you're probably right that there are a lot of people that are even starting further behind the starting line than say a generation ago.
I mean, I'm not sure if you were listening in previously to the last segment with this woman whose mother there's a cause with the hashtag Give Susie Back Her Home, and they did an action on Friday here in New York at on Park Avenue in front of J.P. Morgan Chase, asking Jamie Dimon to give Susie back her home because it's just predatory. Like they're saying that she didn't make these payments when she did, and I mean now the woman is 80 years old, and I think was going on for like 14 or so years, and it's just criminal, preying on older people or just vulnerable people.
Yeah, so I think our answer, the group I work for, the Center for Effective Government, really believes that government is the answer. That we can, if we insist government works for us and not works for big corporations or wealthy individuals, that we can set rules that protect everyone. We've done it before. We did it in the 40s and 50s and 60s. We changed the course of the country. We made the country more inclusive. We made the country fairer so that people could have a fair shot at developing their gifts and succeeding. And pretty much since the 1980s, we've been backpedaling on that, and those things have been getting eroded. And life here has been getting harder and harsher for many people.
And so, so the government basically sold the people out to corporations. I mean, I don't know, like they got rid of who what's his name? Clinton got rid of Citizens United. Oh no, sorry, Glass-Steagall.
Right. Yeah, there's been lots of bad policy choices made along the way, and a lot of it is because there are so many corporate lobbyists in Washington D.C. and they fund elections and have the ear of people in Congress that make the rules and even in the White House. So we need to really rise up. And we saw in other periods of time there was a lot more citizen agitation. There were many more strikes in the 50s and 60s and 70s than there are today from labor unions.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful because we start to see people taking risks and getting out and agitating in the streets. I've been very hopeful with what we've seen with the fast food workers and the low wage workers.
Yeah.
Really getting out in front of McDonald's and other places and saying, we deserve a living wage. We deserve, $12 or $13 or $15 an hour. That's what it costs to live, particularly in high cost areas.
So let me say this to you, because I have a friend, or had a friend, that would say, oh, why do they deserve more than like $7.50 an hour? They're only flipping burgers.
Well, because they need that money to live. So I grew up in a middle class house. My dad worked in a factory in the management office, a white collar job. He had an engineering degree, so he was educated. Our next door neighbor delivered milk for a dairy, drove a truck all day and hauled milk to people's homes. My dad's income and my neighbor's income was about the same, even though my dad had a college education and was working as a manager. And that was terrific. I mean, we had all kinds of different people in our neighborhood. There was a guy that ran a bank who lived down the street. He didn't make too much more than my dad or the milkman. So we've gotten in this very stratified world where we say some people's work is valued at 10 or 100 or 1,000 times somebody else's, and I think that's kind of crazy because at the end of the day we need each other.
Right, I agree.
And so we should be demanding that and pressing for that and working for that.
Exactly. I mean, and the fact that, I always think that people in companies should be paid a percentage of what they earn for that company. Like, how much did they help that company earn that day? And they get a cut of that.
Yeah, so I think that's somewhat hard to figure out, but the principle of it is certainly a good one.
That would be, because it makes no sense to be, like, no matter how much you make for this company, you're just going to get like $7.50 an hour. And you're like, and it's the people at the bottom that are the ones that make the company the most money.
That's right. They're the ones that have the contact with the customer, and if they're, worried or upset that they can't pay their mortgage or something else is going on bad in their lives,
exactly.
Then they're going to treat the customer poorly in many cases, and that's not going to be good for the business.
Exactly.
The CEO doesn't have all that many contacts with customers. They tend to deal in different worlds. There's a good case to be made that the frontline employees are the ones that are most important. We're talking about fast food workers, and the top CEO in our report is the guy who runs Young Brands, which is the parent company of KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. And he has $234 million in his corporate retirement account. That's enough to give him a $1.3 million check each and every month after he retires. And the really sad part is Young Brands has over 500,000 employees. They don't say exactly how many of those are in the U.S. versus the rest of the world, but we can guess that it's many, many thousands. And only 8,000, fewer than 9,000, 8,800 or so, of Young Brands employees have any sort of retirement plan. So here you have the richest CEO in terms of his retirement assets, and he presides over a company of predominantly low-wage workers where only a few thousand of them have any sort of retirement coverage at all.
And the thing is, he'll never even ever be able to spend all of that money. I think these people have a serious, mental illness problem. I really do. They're covering up for some deep-rooted, self-hatred or something.
Well, I think there's a perverse need to prove your worth by how much you earn. rather than how much you serve or how much people respect you.
But they're
or
not earning it, you know, they're not earning it, right? I mean, they're not earning it.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to refrain when I'm talking about large CEO pays of using the word earn, or, you know, I say they receive or they got or something, because, yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say that somebody, you know, should make, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars an hour. Is what it boils down to sometimes.
I mean, it is. It's like obscene. It's like, you know, I really wish that we lived in a world where people would come to see it more as a mental illness than something to like look up to. Because I don't see how you can look up to that, because the guy clearly has a freaking problem, like an addict, like an alcoholic or a drug addict.
Well, I think the problem is we do live in a culture where CEOs today are kind of rock stars, and they are looked up to, and they are, you know, the kind of lifestyle people aspire to. When I was a kid growing up, I remember, you know, CEOs got honored because their businesses gave a lot away to charity, or they, you know, cut their pay in order to avoid layoffs, or they, you know, donated things to their communities. They, you know, bought baseball uniforms for all the kids in town or something like that to play baseball in the summer. Those were the things that marked a good, solid business leader, not how much they took home and, you know, how fancy their house was or whether they flew in a private jet.
And the thing, you know, I just, you know, it would help their health like so much to give. It really would. I think it would make them like happy. Maybe not initially, but, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't it's not my area of expertise, but yeah, I think a lot of people live very stressful, isolated lives. I think about it, you know, the private jet's kind of an interesting image for me, because when, you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, corporate executives, all kinds of corporate people flew in normal planes. They might have flown in, you know, in the front compartment in first class, but a lot of them just flew like normal people that could afford to fly. And flying is kind of a privilege in itself, but they didn't have special privileges of flying in private jets and not having to go through security and other things like other people do. And now they just live in this very rarefied world where they never meet anybody. I had a very funny experience. I used to be a security analyst for an investment firm, and I was at a conference with a bunch of CEOs from telecom companies, and the CEO of AT&T, which was located maybe 20 miles away from downtown Manhattan in New Jersey, had to cancel because the weather was foggy and his helicopter couldn't land at the hotel near where the conference was. And later that afternoon, somebody from MCI, which is a former long-distance company that some of your listeners may know about, he arrived from London, and he made it in just fine. And when someone asked him about the difference between his company and AT&T, he said, I flew coach from London and took a cab from the airport, and AT&T couldn't get there because they could only fly by helicopter. He couldn't jump in a taxi or a limo and go on ordinary roads. So I think there's a lot of that kind of rarefied lifestyle that many CEOs have. They don't rub elbows or have occasion to see what normal people's lives are like, and I think that's part of the problem.
Yep. They're almost kind of in like a solitary confinement of their own making.
Yeah, and I would never want that to live that way. I think that's a very challenging and unfun way to live.
Exactly. I mean, hopefully they'll realize it and be able to find their way out in time. But I just wanted to refer to your article on the foreffectivegovernment.org, Tale of Two Retirements. There's a chart with the 10 largest CEO retirement funds, and I'll just name the corporations. Like, it's the Yum brands, like you mentioned before, Lucadia National, Honeywell, which I'm familiar with, Progressive, I'm not sure who that is.
That's the insurance company that has Flo as their mascot on TV.
Okay, yeah. I am familiar with them. McKesson is the next one. I'm not sure what they do.
They're the largest drug distributor in the country.
Go ahead.
They're a drug wholesaler, so they sell to hospitals and people like that.
And then CVS Health, we know who they are. Centene, Centene.
Yeah, I forget what they do. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Comcast, Prudential Financial, and Chubb, which
It's an insurance company.
yeah. And I'm just going to again refer to, so your report findings, right, you mentioned the Yum Brands former CEO David Novak sitting on the largest retirement nest egg in the Fortune 500 with $234 million. While hundreds of, I literally was like choking, while hundreds of thousands of his Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC employees have no company retirement assets whatsoever. I mean, that is just like, it's just abuse. It's plain and simple, like domestic violence. The second point says the top 10 largest CEO retirement funds, all held by white males, add up to $1.4 billion compared to $277 million for the largest retirement funds held by female CEOs, and $196 million for the 10 largest held by CEOs who are people of color. Nearly half of all working age Americans have no access to any retirement plan at work. The median balance in a 401k plan at the end of 2013 was $18,433, enough to generate a monthly retirement check of $104. And then it gets into rewriting the rules. So, I've posted it on social media. I'll post it again, this article. Right. See, it talks about strengthening the ability of all the workers to unionize, the very thing that you said that Reagan broke up in the 80s.
Right.
I mean, how are people going to have their president on their side and the White House on their side?
That's right. We have to rise up and make sure they're on our side, and go to protests and contact your legislators and call the White House and talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Make sure they don't believe that it's their fault. There's rules we need to change. There's organizing we need to do.
So thank you so much, Scott Klinger of foreffectivegovernment.org.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So that does it for this Tuesday, November the 3rd, Organic News on Awake Radio. Please go to my YouTube channel, April Waters, Watters. Please help me to keep this radio station going, because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do it. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and be back here next Tuesday. Look me up on Facebook, Cat Waters with 2 T's. Speak truth to power. The wealth is within. Good night.